I'm David Calfee, and I approve this message.
Hello everyone, Steve Hartline. Welcome to the Mix TV Candidate Spotlight Series, a chance for voters to hear more from the candidates for office. And our candidate spotlight guest is David Calfee. David is a candidate for Criminal General Sessions Judge, officially I guess Part 2. David, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Well, David, these spotlights, we really want the voters to get more of a background sense of the candidates. And so just tell us a little about yourself and how you grew up and that sort of thing.
Sure, absolutely. Born and raised here in East Tennessee. Grew up on a small family cattle farm, actually up in eastern Rome County between Lenoir City and Kingston, about an hour up the road. We raised beef cattle growing up, so spent a lot of time outside, spent a lot of time building fence, feeding cattle, heated two homes with firewood, so used to hard work, as it were. Attended Cave Creek Primitive Baptist Church there, and actually we had a visiting pastor that came every month from down here in New Hope Primitive Baptist Church out in the southeast corner of the county. Came to Cleveland periodically to see the distant Calfee cousins that are down here. Went to Rome County High School, played football up there, poorly for the most part. And then went off to East Tennessee State University where I did my bachelor's degree, changed majors once from biology to history. Stayed on up there, got my master's degree also in history before taking some time off, worked actually as a heavy equipment operator for about a year, and then went to law school out in Memphis. After that, came back to East Tennessee, did not want to stay in the western part of the state, and answered an ad in the newspaper and ended up getting a job with Child Support Services here in Bradley County. So actually, January 22nd was 15 years that I've been practicing law here in Bradley County. Spent my entire career here.
Well, David, also, you mentioned you worked at Child Support Services. You're running for this judgeship, this Criminal General Sessions. So let me ask you, how has working at Child Support Services, how has working on the farm, do you think, prepared you for this candidacy?
Sure. Well, and it's funny, because when I went to law school, the two things that I never wanted to do were criminal law and family law. And that has been overwhelmingly what I've done in my practice. So it's one of those examples, I think, where you get led in a direction where you need to be rather than what you intend to do. So when I originally started working for child support, obviously, maybe not obviously to some people, but there's a lot of interplay between the criminal justice system and child support cases, because a lot of times people are incarcerated for non-payment of support, and that was really my sort of crash course in criminal justice. You would have inmates coming in, they were using terms I didn't know what meant, and as I continued to work with both the people who were petitioning to get support and people who were sometimes just frankly not able to pay, sometimes just wouldn't pay, you really start seeing a lot of different personalities. You start seeing a lot of different factual backgrounds and bases to underlie these cases, and there's a lot broader story in a lot of situations. Started becoming very much aware of how drug abuse plays into our criminal justice system. And it made me very interested when I left child support in November of 2007 and went into private practice, where I am and have been since then. It made me interested in being directly involved in criminal law. And so at that point in time, the two things I said I never wanted to do, again, became overwhelmingly what I've spent my time doing for the last 15 years now.
What have you learned, heard on this during this campaign, as you campaign and get ready for the election in May? What are you hearing from people? What are they concerned about?
Well, probably two or three major issues. Of course, I hear a lot of people who are concerned with the way that our court system works. When you come in off the street, I think that a lot of people do not fully understand our criminal justice process, for example. And I meet with clients all the time who don't understand the different levels of our criminal justice system. They don't understand what each particular court do. So there's some confusion about that. I think that there's also some frustration with the way the process works. And I think people want things to work more quickly, perhaps, than what they are. So delays in prosecution of cases, which in some cases you're waiting on lab work, for example, on a DUI case. Tennessee Bureau of Investigation on blood alcohol labs right now, generally 2 to 3 months, you're waiting from the time that they receive them. Sometimes that's not until 3 or 4 weeks after an arrest is made. For toxicology reports looking for controlled substances in somebody's system, that sometimes is much longer. So there are some delays in our system that the layman wouldn't necessarily know about. And I think that as a result of that, it gives at least the appearance that some prosecutions are moving more slowly than what they actually are. I also hear a lot of people who are very concerned about issues of bond. People who are repeat offenders that have multiple cases pending at any given time, who are released on bond. Again, that's one of the issues where the way our system is set up, if you are arrested on a Saturday night, so to speak, you are entitled to have a preliminary hearing within 14 days of your arrest. Most of the time that just doesn't happen because of the logistics involved in getting witnesses, victims, law enforcement all present for a hearing. And when you get to the end of that 14 days, an inmate, defendant, has a right to a bond hearing. And when they are subsequently arrested, they are also entitled to a bond hearing. And I think that you hear a lot of people who are starting to talk about bond reform, the way that our bail bonding system works. And I know that there's been some legislation proposed by Senator Bell and others to rework that system. But we as judges and lawyers have to work with what we are given. So until there's any sort of change in that system, you do have to have a bond hearing or you do have to have a preliminary hearing. And then lastly, of course, substance abuse is such a huge part of our criminal justice system. And I would say roughly 75 or 80% at least of our cases are nonviolent drug or property related offenses. And most of the time, drug use and property crimes go hand in hand with one another. So you have a huge number of people who have substance abuse issues, are not treated. They don't necessarily, in some cases, want treatment. In other cases, they don't necessarily know what resources are available to them. And as a result, you have people who have these ongoing substance abuse problems that are in and out of court chronically. And so I think that a lot of people are concerned about that and how do we address it. You have seen from our state legislature and Governor Lee more of a focus on alternative sentencing, treatment as opposed to incarceration for those who want it and who are amenable to correction in that way. So, for example, in our criminal court, Judge Freiberg and Judge Donaghy have at their disposal a drug court program, a recovery court, where they can be sort of overseeing the process of drug treatment, rehabilitation, and counseling on an intensive basis with people who are charged with felonies. We don't have that in our general sessions court, so we are relying a large part on private programs, charitable organizations who do that sort of work. And I think that you see a lot of people in our community who are very interested in seeing more of a formalized drug treatment program installed in our criminal sessions court from the people who may not be felony drug offenders. you may have repeated misdemeanor drug offenses, which right now are just not getting channeled up into those more specialized court programs. So I think that those are the things that I hear a lot about as I've talked to people and been out in the community during this campaign season.
David, last question. If elected, give me 2, 3 things maybe, or just whatever is on your heart, your mind, that you would want to get accomplished.
Sure. I think that first and foremost, we do have, through the years that we've been dealing with this pandemic, we do have a backlog of cases. And while it is not insurmountable, it is something that we need to start working through effectively. So efficiency in our process, identifying older cases that are lingering around without good cause, setting those cases either for hearing or for disposition by agreement. Let's get them moving. Let's get them moved through so that people are not having to come to court 2, 3, 4 times or more in their cases not being heard. And there's no one in particular whose fault that may be. There is a vast amount of coordination that has to occur for a criminal case to process through our system to conclusion. Cooperation between our district attorney, our defense counsel, law enforcement, our court clerk, and then ultimately the judge. So let's work through these efficiently. Let's get some of these older cases cleared up. Let's make sure that we're moving cases along, not by some arbitrary deadline that may be set, but what is reasonable for each particular case and what is reasonable for both the victims who are impacted, law enforcement who has to come to court for hearings, and then also for the defendants involved. I do want to continue to work on the relationships that I've built over the years with all the parts of our criminal justice system to help make sure that happens. I also am very interested in implementing a more formalized drug treatment program in our Sessions Court. And going hand in hand with that, also looking at alternative resolutions to cases. On misdemeanor cases, our criminal sessions judge can have what's called a bench trial and can make a decision on the case without it going through the grand jury process and going over to our criminal court, to one of our circuit judges. I think that we need to encourage misdemeanor cases to be heard and resolved in General Sessions Court. I think that also one of the big things that we have as well is working with the Sheriff's Department and law enforcement to help maintain and manage our jail population. On average, it costs $74 a day to house an inmate in Bradley County, and there are typically in excess of 300 inmates in our county jail each day. We have a 100-bed facility that's designed to be a workhouse. Typically, there's 8 to 12 people who are actually in that facility, and people who have employment or people who are employable, rather than sitting in jail all day with the taxpayers paying to upkeep those individuals, I would very much like to see that program push so that people can keep a job, can help offset some of the cost of incarceration, and also avoid some of the ripple effects you have when people are incarcerated, lose employment, and then are unable to pay bills and so forth. And lastly, we talk a lot about general sessions, civil/juvenile, and criminal sessions, but what a lot of people don't know is our 2 general sessions judges are supposed to dovetail with one another. Anything one judge can do, the other can as well, ideally. We need to get back into a situation where our 2 judges are cooperating with one another and help dividing the load, so to speak, so that our General Sessions court system as a whole works easier, better, more efficiently for everyone, whether it's a juvenile criminal case, adult criminal case, an eviction, or any other issue that comes in front of our judges. I think that Bradley County is better served by 2 judges who are working together to make sure that happens. So those would be the priorities if I'm successful in this election. Would very much look forward to working hard and serving Bradley County for the 8-year term that this would be.
David Calfee, thank you so much for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Here at Mix 1041 and Mix TV, we are maximizing our coverage this election season with one-on-one interviews, scheduled discussions, candidate spotlights, web polls, and so much more. We believe it is important that you stay informed to make decisions that matter to you and your family. Don't miss a minute. Visit mymix1041.com. Our election coverage is presented by the Logan Thompson Law Firm.